Humanity Matters.
Welcome to Influential Origins with Alan Mindel. And today for HMTV, we have a tremendous guest, Mitchie Takeuchi, who's made a phenomenal documentary, and is a hibachi, who is a second-generation survivor from the nuclear blast at Hiroshima. So we're so incredibly welcome to hear your story.
Thank you.
It's a phenomenal Japanese and American story, and it's our honor and privilege to have you here today.
Thank you so much for giving me this amazing opportunity.
So you have a story that may be foreign to others, but as someone who comes from Holocaust culture to a certain extent, you know, it has a lot of similarities. Can you talk about the influence your mother has had in your life?
That's a very good question. My mother's influence on me is rather complex because in a way, we had a very different personality. I'm more like outgoing, while she was very much like a traditional, very dutiful woman.
Yeah.
And she's been through so much in her lifetime, and yet she never really voiced it.
Yes.
And yet I felt certain sadness and also frustration in her life very quietly. And because of my parents' relationship, I used to think that why is she so kind of not courageous? Why is she always quiet? And one of the reasons why I came to the United States is because I really wanted to pursue to live as a woman in this more free, independent society, because I did now live like my mother. And she really supported me. And in a way, she kind of wanted to live her life through me, kind of a situation. So in a way, she was my big motivation to leave Japan, and yet she has been always quietly supporting me. In that way, my mother is my deep twin soul.
Because she was the one in the early 70s when your father wasn't so sure that you should leave.
Correct.
Was the one who said, go for it.
Yes.
Learn psychology in the United States. You know, become that person and live that life that I didn't have the chance to live. She really made that sacrifice to make sure you would have that opportunity.
Exactly. And yet, since I was so young and immature then, I didn't really realize that.
What she had done for you.
Exactly. I took it for granted.
So your grandfather was head of the Red Cross Hospital from 1937 to 1947 in Hiroshima.
Right.
Okay. And so over the entire period of World War II, he had gone from Tokyo and was in charge of that facility.
Yeah, he was a primarily military surgeon. And let's see. So his career started as a military surgeon, and he was a surgical professor at the Army Medical School in Tokyo. Yeah. Then he went to the front line of North China War right before he was transferred to Hiroshima.
What year was that?
That must have been, 1935, 6. Okay. He got sick there. That's why he was transferred back to Tokyo. And then he had a choice for his next move. And then he chose to be the founding president of Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital.
Yeah. So in that role, when the bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, he was in charge of that facility.
Yes.
And like many others, he was injured at that time.
Yes, yes. He had the 7 broken bones all over his body, so he was not able to move. His mind was conscious, but he was not able to move for a few weeks.
So at that point, I mean, all of Hiroshima had experienced something that nothing else in the world had ever compared to at that time.
Exactly.
Which was the subject of your documentary, which we can give that title out now if you can for me.
Sure, sure.
The Vow.
The Vow from Hiroshima, yes.
The Vow from Hiroshima. And so you followed in your documentary the story of another woman, Sugari, right, who had this incredible story of her survival and then eventual activism. Right?
Yes, Setsuko Soro, yes.
Yeah. But your own family had their story at that time too, because he was in charge of the hospital. And your mother, your quiet mother at that time, helped your grandfather, helped heal him, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So they were all very much intertwined. It's an event that if you were in Hiroshima today, there's a park dedicated to all that were killed that day. And it was about 140,000 total by December 45, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It was the largest single detonation event that had taken lives at that point in history. But it also was the singular event that I think ended at that point World War II at the same time, right?
Yes. Japan surrendered August 15.
Yeah. So, you know, that time, and you had touched it a little bit in your documentary, you talked about how, you know, American generals had censored some of the documentation at that time, or some of that stuff. But there was also a rebuilding of Japan at that time.
Yes. I can clarify that press code situation because, you know, I find it very, very interesting. This is why people don't know much about it. Not outside of Japan, but also in Japan. So apparently, Allied forces came in, right?
Right.
And September 1945, they exercised the press code to Japanese government and media, which is not to criticize about what U.S. has done or what U.S. is about, including, therefore, not to mention anything about nuclear weapon.
Right.
So the press could not write about it, anything like that. Therefore, what exactly happened because of the atomic bombing in Hiroshima and Nagasaki was never shared for the rest of Japan as well. So Japanese people even didn't know anything about it.
But your grandfather, even with that that blackout to a certain extent, still wrote a seminal article about what had occurred. You had covered that in your documentary, right? He still wrote about it,
Except
in his role.
That was kept.
Right.
Well, actually, that notebook, I mean, there was another NHK special program about what really happened at the Hiroshima Red Cross Hospital, made last year based upon the notebook, the work notebook that he kept, which I recently found at my parents' house when I was clearing up my parents' house to sell because they've been gone for a decade. So that was 2023.
Right.
In, let's say, May, June, I found a lot of archival material at my parents' house that my grandfather kept.
Right.
And I went through it. Some of it I couldn't really read because of the old-fashioned Japanese writing and so on. But there was one notebook that looked rather seriously important.
Yeah.
So I took it to the Hiroshima Medical Association because I really wanted to donate all these things. And then NHK, that the public caster, became very interested in the notebook. And then that notebook had historical, they called it Class A findings. So...
And those findings were medical findings? through it?
It's more like who exactly came in, which day, who visited,
Right.
and so forth. And, so I couldn't really tell. I couldn't believe how NHK was able to create this amazing narrative special program from this notebook,
Right.
because I guess they have like a group of experts, historians, who were able to decipher
Right.
what it was said in the notebook kind of situation.
So within that, while it was recorded to a point, your parents, and this was commonplace, never really discussed what had occurred, right?
Right.
Did they not discuss the bombing, or did they not discuss anything about the war itself?
I think, I was thinking about this, right? How did I find out
Right.
for as much as, I found out? Well, I believe my parents talked about it. Let's say how horrible the war was or how difficult it was to rebuild.
Yes.
And so on. I think they might have spoken to it about it. They referred. But it was never discussed with the children.
Right. Now, when it was never discussed, it was the war itself that wasn't discussed, or was it just Hiroshima that wasn't discussed?
I think all of it.
All of it.
Right. But
Okay.
particularly, it's interesting because in Hiroshima, when you grew up in Hiroshima, it was understood by everyone. It did happen. People did die and so on. And since my generation,
Right.
particularly, because I was born still close to the end of the World War II, right? In 1950s.
Right.
So we remember growing up not hearing about it, or that conversation was never directing at us. We overheard certain things that what parents were talking about. And my father wasn't from Hiroshima, right? So he didn't really experience it. He was a surgeon as well, too. So in my family, whenever they talked about atomic bomb, it was always like a very personal side of sadness. I remember, hearing my mother talking to my father saying, my friend Yoshiko's, she has such a difficult childhood. Her both parents died instantly, and it was so sad. Her only son, her only brother, killed himself in front of the parents' grave. Or I remember when there used to be doctors' monthly meetings,
Right.
which went over at different doctors' homes. And I remember I was only like 8 years old, and one night, like 15 doctors were gathering at my parents' house, where of course I was, and I was so excited about all these guys were there, and I was a little kid. But that night, my parents were sort of like clearing up all the dishes and so forth in the kitchen, and I heard my parents saying about one doctor who was there at the meeting.
Right.
They're saying like, it's so nice to see that the Dr. Shima looks so much stronger. And apparently he had some kind of a throat cancer, and he was going through this, treatment and so on. And, so they're talking about this doctor. And my mother said, he went through such a difficult time, And then my father was saying that, I know, his family and his medical staff were wiped out because of the atomic bomb, wiped out, right? And his hospital, Shima Hospital, which his medical practice, that particular location was, the A bomb just exploded right above his medical.
So that was it.
That was it. So
Right.
he himself, Dr. Shima, and his nurse happened to be out of town that day.
That's why they survived.
Right. So as a child, right, listening to parents' conversation, and then the word for wiped out. When I heard the word wiped out, zenmetsu, completely gone, I didn't know the word, but it sounded so severe, so intense.
That you understood that there was something
Yeah,
there
yeah. And
that
then
was unique.
I asked, what does that mean, wiped out, zenmetsu? And then my father said that means everybody died.
Right.
Then I remember feeling that, then how come did that old man, how come he wasn't crying? How come he looked fine? That gave me such strong impact.
Right.
That's one of the strongest sensation I felt as a child, the word.
But the thing is, you couldn't have, because of the life you led and the life so many from Japan have led. I mean, as we fast forward to today, Japan for a generation now has been a great American ally, right?
Yes.
Because after the war, America, unlike had happened in a lot of previous wars, helped rebuild Japan and took it as an ally.
Yes.
And so you yourself, when you came here in 1972, you could not have had a very negative view of the U.S.
Not at all.
So, one, tell me about the view for you and your family of how people viewed the United States post-World War II and when you came here in 1972.
That's a very good question. Well, let me think how I can explain. Well, I was born in 1955, which is just 10 years after the World War II.
Right.
So I belong to the generation where nobody was talking about the World War II. It was sort of like a taboo.
Right.
That the press code went on till 1952, right? So 7 years was a long time, right?
Right.
Not to mention anything about the fact of that the losing the war and so forth and so on. But I believe that Japanese and Japan were so ego anxious and engaged in rebuilding,
Right.
because that they are really at the end of their rope. How is it how you call it? Right? They are like a very surviving level when the war ended.
2.5 million Japanese combatants alone, forget civilians, right?
And then Japan has no resources. Teeny little island country.
Right.
So the food was so non-existing and all kinds of things. So I think Japanese people were so tired of very surviving level of daily life. So I think United States brought this bright, more abundant, free spirit into
Well, it's
Japan.
a very different culture. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to understand and get at with you is, for Americans, obviously, December 7th, 1941 is a day that'll live in infamy, Pearl Harbor. That is what got America into the war, right? And it was a war, of tremendous casualties on all sides and tremendous brutality. I mean, we're in a Holocaust center, and so we know that the Jewish suffering was incredible, right? But there was, a lot of actions by a lot of folks, and Japan itself was an imperial power at that time, right?
Sure.
And had their own actions that they had taken. They didn't have a lot of friends in the neighborhood at the conclusion of the war.
Yes.
But that entire mindset is no longer present today, or wasn't in 1972 in Japan, is it? Because, you talked about the emperor visiting your father.
or visiting Hiroshima, and then grandfather was giving the lecture. Yes.
Right, and they made this painting, this beautiful painting, to memorialize your grandfather, who was concluding his role as the head of the Red Cross Hospital, and they're commemorating him meeting the emperor.
Right, reporting of what really happened.
What really happened. But the emperor, as you pointed out in your documentary, went from someone who pre-war was like a god, and now is viewed completely differently.
Right.
Because it's not just him that might be viewed differently. It's that whole culture is different.
Right.
So
the whole system changed.
The whole system changed.
Yeah, but that's the area where I don't think I can really talk about, because I was too young, and I didn't even experience. Well, what can I say? People who.
But you're a beautiful product of that system, because look at the success you've had. You're an international person, right? You came from these humble beginnings, and you came to America, right? You made it in business and in other ways here. You learned your psychology. You're a worldwide woman, right? And you've done this incredible documentary, which people will watch on PBS and so on and so forth, you know. And you've been part of recording, you know, the person that you met in 2010 that we can talk about, you know, won a Nobel Peace Prize. So you've been around the world a bit, right? And so has Japan, right? So there is an incredible success that Japan has had, a rebirth that occurred after this. You know, so I wonder how that's perceived, you know. Is Japan cognizant of this change? And, you know, have they restudied their actions that were going on during World War II? And have they taken appreciation and grace for where the country is today?
Okay, I understand. I'm sure that's the case. And then I think that in my case, I went to only girls mission school, which was co-founded by American missionary woman from South Methodist or something like that. And when we grew up, we didn't even learn about World War II at all. You know, our education wasn't really focused on that.
Right.
And I remember wanting to, after school, I always wanted to go and see a film, like American film, particularly independent film. And I used to do that with my good friends, right?
Right.
And the reason why I came to the United States has a lot to do with this one film that I watched.
Okay.
If I had not seen this film, I don't think I even came up.
What was the film?
That was Clute by Jane Fonda.
Okay.
And that film was a great film, right? Because Jane Fonda won Academy Award and stuff like that. But by watching the film, I really learned there was one role of person who was some kind of a doctor in the film.
Right.
And I didn't really know what the particular role of that doctor looked like woman's job was. And it turns out that she was either psychoanalyst or psychologist, where the protagonist, the main character, Jane Fonda, Brie Daniels, went to see and talk about her life. She was working. She was a wannabe model, actress, who was making living as a working girl, girl, right?
Right.
And she would go and talk to this, a doctor about her problem and issue and concerns and so on. I was only high school student. I don't think I was supposed to be watching and seeing that kind of a film, but I did anyway. And I was shocked to see, wow, there is this job, some kind of a doctor who, someone like her, who is a working girl, can go and talk about how she feels and how she wants to live life. I was stunned. And it took
Did it
me.
stun you that it was a woman that was in
It
that
was like there's
doctor's role?
such a profession,
Right.
and I felt I had to watch the film several times to figure out what the role was, and it was, I think, psychoanalysis. But I really wanted to be that particular person. So
Right.
I basically said to my parents, I really want to become, it's more like a psychoanalyst, right? And there is no school here, therefore I sent me
Because
to
that
school.
role didn't really exist in Japanese culture.
And that's when I really experienced the power of moving images, like movie, how the movie can open up the world, which you don't even know exists.
And your world opened up,
Amazing.
and you were given that opportunity. And
Yes,
took it.
yes. And my parents are good to me too.
So we'll go talk about this more and other topics that are going in
Okay.
our next session through. So thank you so much.